The first thing anyone remembered about that afternoon was the sound. Not a scream, not a shout, just the sharp, hollow crack of plastic hitting tile, echoing through the cafeteria like a dropped bone. Trays froze midair. Conversation stalled. 100 heads turned at once. And at the center of the room, beneath the fluorescent buzz of Ridgeview High's massive lunch hall, a girl stood perfectly still as her lunch, rice, vegetables, and the curry her mother had packed that morning, spread across the white floor like spilled paint. The boy who had kicked it, Ethan Marsh, 6'2", varsity football shoulders, and the smirk of someone who had never lost a fight he started, stood over the mess like he was proud of it, proud of the chaos, proud of the silence, proud that every eye in the room knew he owned the moment. "Next time," he said, nudging a piece of chicken with the toe of his sneaker, "watch where you sit." The girl didn't move. Her face was unreadable, her posture straight, chin slightly lifted, eyes steady. Not frightened, not angry, just still, like someone who wasn't surprised, someone who had been here before, in different rooms, under different kinds of lights. Her name was Amara Lewis, quiet honor roll kid, sketchbook always tucked under her arm, the kind of student who floated through school like she was made of air. Most people barely noticed her. Until now. She looked down at her ruined lunch, then up at Ethan, slowly, calmly, as if measuring something invisible. A few students shifted uneasily. Something about the moment felt wrong. The air felt too tight. Ethan chuckled. "What, you gonna cry or something?" But Amara didn't cry. She didn't speak. She didn't even blink. She just took one step back, centering her weight, the movement so small and so natural that nobody registered what it meant. Nobody except the one teacher watching from across the room who suddenly went pale. Because Amara's stance wasn't random, it was trained. And Ethan Marsh, the toughest bully in the school, the boy who thought he owned every hallway he walked in, was about to learn something he had never learned before. He had picked the wrong girl, and the cafeteria was about to witness it. Before we continue, if you're drawn into this story already, if moments like this make you feel the tension of justice balancing in real time, go ahead and like this video, share it with someone who loves powerful storytelling, and subscribe to Acts of Depth so you never miss a story that hits straight to the soul. Now, the moment Ethan leaned in, everything started. Amara flinched, not backward, but forward. Barely a whisper of movement, but her foot shifted, her shoulders aligned, and she exhaled in a way that only someone trained to control breath under pressure exhaled. She wasn't a fighter. She didn't look like one. But there was a coiled readiness in her posture, quiet, precise, like a bowstring pulled tight. Ethan didn't notice any of that. Bullies rarely notice the things that matter. He reached out and shoved her shoulder. And that, according to everyone who later described the moment, was when the world thinned, like the air before lightning strikes. Because instead of stumbling, Amara gently guided the force of his shove past her body, letting his own weight pull him off balance. It wasn't a throw, not yet, but it changed everything. Ethan blinked, confused for the first time. "You trying something?" Amara still didn't speak, because speaking wasn't necessary. What mattered wasn't the move she had just made, but the years behind it, the classes, the training, the discipline, the reason she never reacted to bullies, even when they whispered about her hair, her skin, her silence, her everything. None of them knew that silence wasn't fear. It was restraint, but restraint had limits. And today Ethan was inching toward the line. A sudden memory flashed through Amara's mind, her mother's voice calling from the side of the mat during her first jiu-jitsu tournament. A soft voice, a warm voice. "Control the moment. Don't let the moment control you." That sentence had followed her for years, through moves, through new schools, through every cafeteria where she'd chosen the far corner table because it felt safe. Her mother's voice was always there, steady, grounding. And right now, in this too bright lunchroom with its buzzing lights and whispering witnesses, that voice rose again. Amara inhaled. Ethan pushed her again, harder this time, expecting the easy victory he'd won over countless smaller students. But his shove met something unexpected, a firmness that didn't budge. Her feet planted, her center of gravity low and controlled, her entire posture folded into the kind of alignment that couldn't be taught overnight. Someone near them whispered, "Is she trained?" But Ethan wasn't listening to whispers. His pride was already bruised by the fact that she didn't react the way he wanted. Bullies didn't need reasons. They needed reactions. Fear, tears, submission. He was getting none of that from Amara. He raised his hand as if to poke her forehead, a mocking gesture, a belittling one. But he never reached her. Because this time, Amara moved. It happened in half a heartbeat, a pivot of her hip, a shift of her weight, a small guiding motion of her hand. Ethan's arm floated forward, pulled not by her strength but by his own momentum. And suddenly, shockingly, he stumbled sideways, catching himself awkwardly against a table. Gasps rippled across the room. Even Ethan froze, staring at his hand, then at her, like she had somehow rewritten physics in front of him. "What? What was that?" he demanded. Amara finally spoke. Her voice was soft, calm, measured. "Don't touch me again." A simple sentence, but the tone, steady, unshaken, carried the kind of warning that humbles even the boldest arrogance. For the first time since the tray hit the floor, Ethan looked unsure. And for the first time since the school year began, the students watching felt something shift. Like today was the day the balance of power inside Ridgeview High began to break. But Ethan Marsh wasn't done, and neither was Amara. As he straightened up, face reddening, jaw tightening, something dangerous flickered in his eyes. A decision that would take this moment somewhere none of them expected. The cafeteria held its breath. The lights hummed, and Amara stepped lightly onto the balls of her feet, preparing for whatever came next. Ethan's fists clenched the way they always did when the script of his dominance started slipping. His face hardened, not with thought, but with instinct. The brute kind that made him dangerous in moments like this. Across the cafeteria, someone whispered his name, a warning, but he didn't hear anything. Not the hum of lights, not the shifting bodies forming a wide circle around them, not even the nervous footsteps of a teacher weaving through the crowd too slowly. He only saw Amara, and she watched him back with a kind of unblinking calm that, in its own way, provoked him more than fear ever could. He stepped forward. She did not retreat. He took another step. She remained still. "Think you're special now?" Ethan growled, voice low so only she could hear. "Think a little, whatever that was, means you can stand up to me?" His shadow fell over her. Still she didn't move. Not from defiance and not from arrogance, but from discipline. A discipline born years before this moment. Years before Ridgeview High, before the cafeteria, before Ethan Marsh even existed in her world. A discipline shaped on soft training mats in a community center 2 cities away, when Amara was 7 years old and heartbreak was still fresh on her mother's face. Back then, the world had felt too large and too loud. Her father had left only months earlier, disappearing into silence without a goodbye, leaving nothing but a scarf that still smelled like cedar, and cologne. Amara had clung to that scarf like a memory that refused to fade, burying her face in it at night, waiting for footsteps that never came. One evening, after seeing her cry quietly in the back seat of their old Honda, her mother had parked in front of a building she'd never entered before. Inside, people in white uniforms moved with purpose, flowing, rolling, falling, rising, like weightless dancers, like they were teaching gravity to behave. A sign on the wall read, "Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, control, not chaos." A tall woman with braided hair and a gentle smile approached them. "You're in the right place," she had said, before Amara's mother could even ask. "Let her try one class. She looks like she carries more weight on her shoulders than a child should." Amara hadn't understood what that meant then. But years later, standing in this cafeteria with Ethan Marsh's anger aimed at her, she understood it perfectly. Because weight and pressure didn't scare her. She had been learning to move through both since she was 7. Ethan lifted his hand again, fist tightening. A few students gasped. A girl whispered, "Please don't." Amara inhaled, not like someone bracing for pain, but like someone centering. Her mother's voice echoed again in memory. "Jiu-Jitsu isn't about hurting people, Amara. It's about ending what shouldn't continue." Ethan lunged, a sloppy, rage-filled motion, shoulder first, heavy, uncontrolled. The kind of attack that looked terrifying but telegraphed itself from miles away to anyone trained to recognize the shift of balance, the tightening of muscles, the tilt of a spine that had already committed to violence. Amara moved an instant before impact. She didn't dodge. She redirected. Her hand touched his arm, barely a brush, but placed with precision. Her hips pivoted, her foot slid in a crescent arc, and suddenly Ethan's body, all brute mass and momentum, was no longer charging at her but collapsing past her. He stumbled again, harder than before, slamming into a chair. The metal clattered, a tray rattled, students flinched. And now the cafeteria wasn't just watching. They were stunned. Ethan whipped around, red-faced, breath shallow, eyes wide with disbelief. "You little—" His words cut off as he took in the crowd, rows of eyes watching him, not with admiration this time, but with something much closer to doubt. And doubt was something Ethan Marsh had never handled well. "You think you're making me look stupid?" he shouted louder now. "You think you can embarrass me?" A teacher called out from across the room, "Both of you, stop!" But it was too far, too late, and too powerless. Ethan lunged again, this time trying to grab her arms, and that was when everything changed. Amara didn't step back. She stepped forward. Her body flowed in a motion so fluid it almost looked slow, though it happened in less than a second. She hooked Ethan's reaching arm, pivoted her torso, aligned her center of gravity with his, and he lifted, all 6'2" of him, just a few inches off the ground, but enough for shock to explode across his face. Students screamed. A tray fell. Someone yelled, "Oh my, she's flipping him." She didn't throw him, not fully, not yet. She let him down gently, her grip controlling his descent, refusing to let his head hit the ground. Because discipline mattered, even when anger surged in her chest, even when old memories pricked at her, memories of kids whispering behind her during elementary school. "She thinks she's tough. She's too quiet, it's weird. Why's she always alone?" Back then, she'd swallowed every insult like stones sinking into her stomach, but jiu-jitsu had taught her something different. Silence is not weakness. Stillness is not surrender. Control is not cowardice. And right now, she controlled the entire room, including Ethan Marsh, whose breath now rasped unevenly as he tried to understand how someone smaller, quieter, lighter than him had just turned his own force against him. He stumbled back a step, chest heaving. "What are you?" he whispered. Amara looked him in the eye, not with pride, not with victory, but with something far more unsettling. Clarity. "I told you," she said softly. "Don't touch me." But Ethan's pride couldn't handle clarity, especially not from someone he expected to crush. A trembling flicker of fear crossed his face, so quick most people would have missed it. But Amara saw it. Everyone saw it, and fear in a bully becomes something dangerous. Ethan's hands curled again, but now there was desperation in the motion. His voice cracked as he shouted, "You think you can just—" But he didn't finish, because right then the teacher finally broke through the circle of students, reaching out, shouting his name, trying to stop what was already spinning too fast. But Ethan pushed past the teacher. He charged at Amara again, this time with everything he had. And in that single thunderous step he took toward her. Every student watching, every teacher shouting, every memory swirling inside her, and every second leading to this moment, collapsed into one decisive breath. Amara shifted her stance. The air tightened, and the moment of impact arrived. Ethan hit her like a freight train made of panic, arms wide, momentum reckless, a desperate attempt to reclaim the power slipping fast from his grasp. The floor trembled as he charged, students stumbling backward, a wave of startled gasps rippling across the cafeteria. But Amara had already moved. Not by much, just a subtle turn of her hips, a shift of her weight, the kind of elegant precision honed only through years of repetition. To the untrained eye, it looked like luck. To anyone who understood leverage, balance, and timing, it was mastery. Ethan's forearm swept toward her. Amara's hands rose, not to strike, not to block, but to guide. She let his own force dictate the motion. His arms sailed past her face. His weight collapsed forward. And in that single, perfectly controlled moment, she completed the motion she had been holding back. A shoulder throw. Ethan lifted off the ground, clean, smooth, almost graceful in its execution, and then landed on the padded part of his back. The impact echoed through the cafeteria like the slap of a flat hand on water. He wasn't injured. Jiu-Jitsu throws are designed to minimize harm. But he was stunned, and for the first time in his life, Ethan Marsh looked small. The crowd exploded with noise. Shouts, laughter, shock, disbelief, but it all blurred together into a distant, indistinct roar. Amara didn't bask in the attention, didn't look around for reactions. Her eyes stayed on Ethan, her posture steady, her breathing controlled. Her training was simple. End the danger. Not the person. But Ethan was far from done. He scrambled up, face redder than the tomato slices still stuck to his shirt, humiliation burning hotter than anger ever had. He wasn't thinking anymore. He wasn't choosing. He was reacting, the way wounded pride always does. "You think you're better than me?" he shouted, voice cracking. "You freak!" A hush fell. The insult didn't sting, but it echoed, bouncing off the old scars Amara carried with fire. The ones from the previous schools, the ones from the whispers, the ones from the kids who sneered at her silence like it was a defect. But something else cut deeper. A boy near the back laughed at the word, not in cruelty, more in disbelief, like Ethan had already lost his grip on reality. And maybe he had. He lunged again, but this time faster, wilder. There was no technique, no structure, just a collapsing tower of fury barreling forward. Amara stepped aside, not far, just a pivot, and Ethan's own speed did the work for her. He slipped. His shoe slid across a smear of curry from her lunch. His knee buckled. His weight shifted too quickly to recover. He crashed to the floor, not from a throw, not from her intervention, but from the very mess he had created. The irony didn't escape her. He groaned, pushing himself up slowly, palms shaking with the effort. The room watched with breathless intensity, unsure whether this moment was tragic or deserved. A teacher reached out to steady him, but Ethan jerked away, breathing heavily. "Don't touch me," he snapped. The words, thrown carelessly, cut sharply through the air. They were the same words Amara had used moments earlier. But when she said them, they carried dignity. When he said them, they carried something else entirely. Shame. Ethan forced himself to his feet, his chest rising and falling like he couldn't get enough air. He stared at Amara, no longer with arrogance, no longer with bravado, but with something raw and conflicted. He looked lost. But pride is stubborn. It clings. It festers. "You think you won?" he spat. There was no answer for that. There was no winning here. There was only survival. Amara opened her mouth to speak for the first time since the confrontation escalated. Maybe to tell him to stop. Maybe to let him walk away. Maybe to finally speak the truth sitting heavy in her chest. But before the words formed, a hand gripped her shoulder. Not a violent grip, just firm, urgent. Coach Daniels, a former Marine with a shaved head and a voice made for breaking up fights. His expression wasn't angry. It was shaken, like he had just witnessed something that didn't belong in a high school cafeteria. "Amara," he said quietly, "come with me." She didn't resist, not because she feared punishment, but because in that moment, standing above a boy who'd spent months tormenting her with whispered jabs, cruel looks, passive-aggressive shoves in hallways, she felt something unexpected settle into her. Not regret, not guilt, just a hollow ache, because she had known from the first shove that this wasn't really about her. Ethan wasn't fighting her. He was fighting something inside himself. Coach Daniels guided her out of the circle, using his presence like a shield against the staring crowd. Amara walked calmly, eyes forward, each step feeling strangely lighter than the last. Ethan didn't move. He just stood there in the middle of the room, hands trembling at his sides, breathing in ragged bursts as everyone stared. Not at the threat he used to be, but at the silence he had become. And silence was something Ethan Marsh had never learned how to survive. As Amara reached the double doors of the cafeteria, she glanced back one last time. Ethan met her eyes, not with fury, but with something that almost resembled a plea. A plea for what, she wasn't sure. Understanding? Forgiveness? A rematch? But Coach Daniels pushed open the door before she could decipher it. Bright hallway light spilled onto her face. The moment was over. Or so she thought. As the door closed behind her, muffling the cafeteria noise into a distant hum, she felt the scarf in her backpack shift. The one thing her father had left behind. She didn't need to take it out. She knew its shape by heart. And for the first time that day, something warm stirred in her chest. Not victory, strength. A strength she had earned, not to defeat others, but to protect herself. And as she followed Coach Daniels down the hall toward the office, unaware of the storm Ridgeview High was about to become, one undeniable truth settled into the quiet. This wasn't the end, not for her, not for Ethan, not for the truth buried beneath his rage. Something deeper was coming, something bigger than a cafeteria fight. And the next chapter of their collision was already unfolding. The hallway outside the cafeteria felt too bright, almost unreal, like Amara had stepped from a storm into a summer morning. The fluorescent lights hummed gently above her, bouncing off the polished floors. Students whispered behind half-closed classroom doors as she passed, their voices drifting like wind in tall grass. Coach Daniels didn't speak. His stride was steady, silent, controlled, just like hers moments earlier. But his expression, reflected faintly in the trophy case glass as they walked, showed something Amara didn't expect. Concern, not disappointment, not anger. Concern. She adjusted her backpack, then smiled, small but genuine. You know what Jiu-Jitsu really teaches? She said. Aiden shook his head. That strength isn't about domination, she said. It's about control, discipline, protecting people, even yourself. Aiden blinked, absorbing the words. And I think, she continued, the hardest thing is learning to protect yourself from the person you used to be. A sharp breath escaped him. Not because she was judging him, but because she was right. They walked again, slowly. At the school doors, Aaliyah paused. Today didn't have to end like it did, she said softly. But you chose truth. That matters. Aiden's voice cracked. You think I can fix who I've been? Aaliyah didn't hesitate. I think, she said, that you're not done growing yet. Then she turned and walked toward the parking lot, the afternoon sun turning her into a silhouette of calm strength. Aiden watched her go, and for the first time, he didn't feel like breaking anything. He didn't feel like running. He didn't feel like wearing armor made of arrogance. He felt like a kid who'd finally been handed a map, one that pointed toward a future where he wasn't the villain in his own story. He walked the opposite direction, toward detention, not as a punishment, but as a beginning. A beginning he owed to himself, a beginning he owed to her, a beginning he owed to the people he hurt. Because change doesn't start when someone forces you to stop. Change starts when someone shows you that you can. And that's what Aaliyah did, without throwing a single punch.